Act 1. Dreams that don't let go. Chapter 1. Moon Crackle. On the first night after the fishing trip, Matt dreamed of a man with no pupils. Not a corpse, not a monster. Just the regular cashier from the small roadside shop off Highway 191, where gas cans turn yellow in spring and the bait and tackle sign clatters in the wind. He stood behind the counter and smiled for far too long, as if his face had become a mask, and beneath that mask was damp cotton. When Matt stepped closer, he noticed thin currents under the cashier's skin, not veins, not vessels, something pale, overgrown, obedient, like the roots of a tame plant.
We take cards.
The cashier said it, but his lips didn't move. The sound seemed to come from inside the counter, from the space between the cans of chewing tobacco and the bags of crushed ice. Matt woke up with a raspy gasp. The room was dark, except for a single stripe of moonlight lying across the closet door. He lay there for a minute, listening to the silence as if it might answer him. Then it came, a soft crackling in his left ear, like crushing dry lichen in your hand. Right, he thought, the river was freezing, idiot. You dove in. Kyle yelled at him not to. Jess laughed like always, and he jumped anyway, because old habits beat old knees. He moved his jaw, tried to pop his clogged ear, and the crackling faded, but not completely. The sound stayed in his head like a whisper from the next room. Chapter 2. Coincidences. By daytime, the signals from the dream started repeating themselves in smaller, quieter ways. A woman by the neighbor's shed, stretching after washing her car, suddenly froze and brushed her fingers along her neck as if checking an invisible thread. In the parking lot outside Albertsons, a man with a shopping basket paused, touched his forehead, then his temple, the exact same gesture the cashier made in the dream. Kids on the playground raised their arms in sync for a second and held them there until the wind shifted them into a different game. Coincidence, Matt told himself. He was tired, his hair was damp, his ears still clogged. And spring near Yellowstone always did this. The air whispered, the pines breathed, wildlife crawled out and rubbed its paws on the earth, and all of it seeped into human gestures. He pulled off his beanie and walked the path from the parking lot toward his twin house. There were several of them built the same way. 2 stories, a porch, a little red paint on the railings. Inside, it smelled like coffee and burnt crumbs. In the sink sat the dog's bowl filled with rainwater. The roof was leaking again. In the bathroom, he leaned toward the mirror and pulled his ear back. Deep inside, past where the light reached, he saw something white, or just a reflection of the tiles. He blinked. The white was gone. Leaned closer again and heard the crackling louder, like someone inside was gently testing enamel with a fingernail.
Stop,
he told his reflection. He said it out loud to chase away the dumb thought.
It's just water.
He folded a tissue, wrapped it around a matchstick. Yeah, genius move. Don't do this. and slowly slid it into his ear, just barely. Something moist brushed the paper. He pulled it out and saw a thin, cobweb-like white strand. Maybe hair, maybe a bit of cotton left from whoever lived here before. He tossed it into the toilet and flushed it. The crackling almost disappeared. Almost. Chapter 3. Synchronicity. The second night didn't bring the store back. It brought his office. His own office. Matt worked as a listener. That's what he called his job, though officially he was a consumer insights manager. Listen and write things down. That was the whole science. In the dream, he sat in the conference room, and across the table a map of their target audience slowly spread like a damp sunrise. Arrows, charts, favorite everyday products. His co-workers stood around swaying, brushing shoulders, huddled so close it looked like they were cold. They mumbled in unison. No actual words, but there was a thought in it, slick and whole. He woke because someone tapped the window once, not loud. Outside, there was only rain, and a thin branch brushing the glass with each gust of wind. His ear felt warm, steady and painless, like electricity lost inside the wiring. In the morning, he drove to work and noticed that in the elevator, 3 people took the same step back at the same time as the doors closed. A perfect little synchronicity, and it chilled his palms.
Morning. You look rough. Head's splitting. It's spring, man. My wife's been complaining for 2 days. Headache and that damn itch behind my ear. Allergies or I don't know. She found like 10 diagnoses on TikTok.
Pitt laughed, but it sounded dull, cardboard flat. And when he turned his head, Matt noticed a pale patch on his neck, uneven, almost like a thin film of lichen on bark, just like in the dream.
Rash and TikTok.
He tried to work. He was listening to a focus group discussing new packaging for protein bars. People said all the right things, textbook answers, yet he felt as if, layered above their words, another quiet conversation was happening, not about protein bars. He removed his headphones, and through the glass he saw every participant reach for their water cups at the same time, drink at the same time, set them down at the same time. The fear that hit him wasn't loud, but it was pure. Chapter 4. Coincidence. Toward the evening, Matt caught himself counting how often people touched their faces. Forehead, 1. Temple, 2. Just behind the ear, 3. The woman from accounting had a tiny Band-Aid there, and she adjusted it every time she walked past the window. The Band-Aid was skin-colored, yet somehow looked even whiter than her skin. At Albertsons, the cashier, not the one from the dream, a different guy, froze for a second, staring into nothing. Then he smiled and asked for a loyalty card. When Matt handed it over, their fingers brushed for a split second, and Matt felt tiny sparks trail across his skin. Not static, not chemical, but something moist, almost organic. He wiped his palm on his jeans and felt a new layer of sound forming in his ear, a soft rustle, like a mouse in the wall discovering a bag of dry leaves. He leapt into the rain too fast. His umbrella jammed. He stopped under the awning and saw 3 teenagers in the parking lot suddenly tilt their heads up toward the sky at the exact same moment, as if someone had called them from above. They stood like that, and he couldn't see their eyes. Then they lowered their heads and walked away with identical steps.
Coincidence.
He said it out loud, hoping the wind would carry the word away and give it to someone who needed it more. Chapter 5. Nightmare. The third night, the first real nightmare. It started with the fishing trip again. The riverbank, cold water. Jess perched on a fallen log, thin and flexible as a reed, shouting at him.
Bet you won't dive in.
Kyle laughed behind him, hard enough to make the brown beer can in his hand tremble. Matt jumped, the water wrapped around his head, and something small, light, almost gentle, slipped into his ear. Even in the dream he understood, yes, this happened. That's exactly how it happened. But this time, when he surfaced, there was no shore. Only roots, thick, endless roots, an enormous system, and along them flowed thin white streams, not water. He climbed upward, but as he stood, the roots rose with him, still reaching out from beneath, from the air. And Jess looked at him, and in his pupils there wasn't darkness. There was something white, blurred, formless.
Together. Quiet.
Jess said it soundlessly. Kyle beside him lifted his fingers to his neck, then to his temple, and the whole world poured into Matt's ear, the noise of a vast, slow river. Matt screamed. In real life. He bolted upright in bed, terrified by his own voice. His heart pounded too hard. A branch was tapping the window. Real, thank God, and rain. The dog, an old lazy retriever, lifted his head and buried his muzzle back into the blanket, as if saying, "If your world needs this, mine can wait." In the bathroom, Matt tried again to look into his ear. Nothing but darkness. He rummaged through the cabinet, found the little toy otoscope he'd once bought out of curiosity, turned on its small, cold light. In the depth, he saw a faint gray curve. Eardrum, he told himself, and almost relaxed. Except, he thought he saw tiny pores on its surface, like skin trying to breathe. He jerked his hand back and exhaled.
Doctor,
He said to the empty room.
I think it's time to see a doctor.
Chapter 6. Something in the air. At work that day, everyone spoke in half-whispers. In the cafeteria, people stood closer than usual, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, as if someone had nudged them together. Pitt, from fourth, looked up from his phone and said,
You hear? Spriggs Flats shut the school down. Half the class. Some kind of skin thing? Allergies, they say. Spring's acting weird this year.
Weird. Matt echoed, and the word felt strange in his mouth. He tried not to look at people's hands, but he saw 2 co-workers touching the same spot on their neck at the same time. A female intern scratching behind her ear, not where her earring was, but higher, and then gently smoothing that spot the way you'd pet an animal, with the grain. Downstairs at reception, the TV was running the news with the sound off. On screen, the anchor was smiling, a director's hand reaching into frame to switch the shot, but at the end of her phrases, tiny white motes puffed out of her mouth. Not static, not a glitch. Matt stepped closer. It was an old screen with a bad panel. Glare, distortion. He walked away and didn't go near the TV again for the rest of the day. Chapter 7. Friends. After work, he stopped by Kyle's place. Kyle still lived the way he did in 9th grade. Pizza straight from the box, a guitar missing 2 strings, a TV in the corner that always had sports on. Kyle was a loud, polite barbarian. He loved people with noise, loved objects with his hands, and because of that, no one ever wanted to fix him.
Oh, the jump-off hero. No cap? You're gonna get soaked. Get in here.
Kyle said, opening the door with his elbow. Jess was already there with a beer, wearing his usual fox-like smirk, the kind that made you think he knew one more joke he would never share.
How's the ear? You sure you didn't bring something back from that river? My wife's been washing all my stuff twice now.
Here we go. TikTok diagnosis hour.
Matt sat down, and for a second, the couch smelled like wet bark. He inhaled, then understood. Spilled beer ages the same way. He wanted to tell them about the dreams, the office, the synchronicities, but every version sounded like, "I'm losing it." So instead, he said,
My ear's clogged. This sounds like someone digging through a bag of dry leaves. What is that? A sinus infection? Ear infection? I never had one as a kid.
My nephew said the same thing when a ladybug flew in his ear. But you're no ladybug. You're big game.
Go see a doctor.
Jess said it seriously. He threw Matt a quick, clear, sober look, as if he brushed the jokes aside and stayed as someone who actually knew how to be there.
May does that around here. Everyone's noses run, ears pop. Spring hits like a fire hose.
They hung out for another hour, talking hockey and road repairs up north. Then Kyle, with zero poetry, suddenly touched his neck and slid the fingers to his temple, the exact gesture, like in the dream. Matt stopped hearing them for a second, because inside his ear a soft click went off, like someone flicked open a tiny latch.
What?
Kyle asked, catching Matt's stare.
Mosquito bite. Itches.
Don't start, man.
Matt smiled, easier that way. But when he got up to leave, Jess hugged him a little tighter than usual and held on half a second longer. Through Jess's shirt, Matt felt not warmth, not tension, something damp cold. No, he told himself. Beer, condensation, sweat, anything else. Outside, the rain fell in thin threads, barely visible in the dark, but brushing his face, all of them drawn northward, toward the ridges, and beyond them, the park, cold soil, and gray skies. Chapter 8. Make it to morning. That night, Matt didn't want to sleep. He paced the house, listening to the dog, listening to the fridge, listening to the air shifting through the heating pipes. The faint crackle in his ear lingered, and it felt like if he stood still long enough, he could make out actual words. He turned on the radio to drown it out. An old country station was playing, the host cheerfully talking about a charity fair in Chico Hot Springs. It sounded like a peaceful world where words still belonged to the people who spoke them. Around 3 a.m., he finally fell asleep and dropped into a dream of his mother's kitchen from 20 years ago. Mom was spreading peanut butter on toast and said, "Hear that? Sounds like someone's walking on snow." But outside, it wasn't snow. It was water again, and roots. And along those roots, someone really was walking. Light, very light footsteps. Each time that someone's foot touched the roots, a new sound bloomed in Matt's ear, fragile but precise, like a dry twig snapping just right. He woke with a jolt from his own heartbeat. The dog was sitting beside him, watching. Dogs can have that look, as if the whole world is you, and if you're broken, then the world is too. Matt stroked his head. Another tiny latch clicked inside his ear.
Morning. Let's just make it to morning.
The north outside the window was turning gray. Act 2. What lived only in his head steps outside. Chapter 9. The Rhythm. Morning greeted him with a strange kind of silence. Not the kind that brings peace, the kind that feels like waiting for a command, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Outside, the neighbors were already out. Mrs. Harper was walking her dog. The dog usually pulled on the leash, but today he walked at her heel, straight as if following a measured line. 2 teenagers rode past on their bikes, no talking, same pace, their heads turning in sync, left, right, as if scanning the territory. Matt stood with a mug of coffee, trying to find a rational explanation. But his ear started again, not a whisper and not a crackle, a rhythm, even, measured, almost like a count. Quiet, 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 pause. He caught himself breathing in that same rhythm. A second later, he forced his breath off beat, the way you break step when you notice you're unconsciously walking in sync with a crowd.
No, you're not taking my rhythm.
The dog looked up at him, sighed, and rested his head on his paws. Same rhythm, exactly the same. Chapter 10. The Gesture. At the office, it started with little things. Candace at reception usually listened to podcasts and chewed watermelon gum. Today, she sat perfectly straight, hands folded, eyes gliding across the monitor without blinking. In the break room, co-workers weren't talking. They just looked at one another and, from time to time, touched the area behind their ears, as if everyone itched in the exact same spot. The gesture made Matt flinch. He turned toward the coffee machine, but the chrome reflection showed 3 people behind him did it at the same time.
You guys got allergies too?
He asked out loud, trying to drag the moment back to normal. All 3 turned their heads toward him the same way, like machines sharing one motor. Spring, they said, almost in unison, not perfectly synced, but too close to what he'd seen in his dreams. Matt dropped a plastic coffee lid. It hit the tile. Nobody reacted. A thin, almost painful crackle ran through his ear, like something inside had grown deeper. Chapter 11. The Password. At lunch, he sat in the corner to watch, and regretted it. A cluster of co-workers by the drink machine stood in a tight arc, shoulders almost touching. No one spoke. They just stared at a single phone lying face up on the table, like it was a campfire. Then, without a cue, they each placed a palm flat on the table, fingers spread wide, and breathed in at the same time. Matt shifted his gaze. To the right sat the intern, small, with an orange hair clip. She was staring straight at him without blinking. Then she slowly raised her index finger to her lips.
Hush.
Not hush as in don't make noise. Hush as a password. A shiver went through him. He jumped up, clipped the chair, and stepped into the hallway. It felt like there was more space in his ear than before, as if something inside was unspooling, spreading its feelers. He leaned against the wall and tried to breathe slowly, but his breathing snapped back to the rhythm coming from his ear. He clamped a hand over it, which only made it feel more alive under his palm. Chapter 12. White Dust. On the way home, the store had changed completely. People weren't talking. Carts moved slowly, as if the shoppers were listening to music he wasn't invited to hear. An elderly couple reached for the bread shelf with the same hand at the same time, while their other hands held tiny cotton pads somewhere behind their ears. A child by the produce stood motionless, fingers trembling like the air beneath them had turned thick. Matt headed to the pharmacy aisle, grabbed hydrogen peroxide, cotton swabs, eardrops. At the register, the girl didn't look at his items. She only raised her eyes when he handed over the cash, and then she smiled. Her teeth were straight, too straight, and between them he saw either a catch of light or a tiny tuft of white fuzz lodged in the gap. He pulled his hand back on instinct. The girl kept staring, unblinking.
Have a nice day,
she said, but her lips didn't form the words in time with the voice. He ran out of the store with the bag the way you run when you've stolen something. Chapter 13. Direction. At home, he locked the door, checked the deadbolts twice. The dog came over and pressed his nose to Matt's knee. Matt flinched at his own reaction, then immediately petted him in apology. Bathroom, bright light. The mirror was fogged, but he wiped it clear with his palm and studied his ear. At first, nothing. Then, the skin behind the ear was slightly swollen, as if something inside was pressing outward. He pressed with his fingers, felt a faint crackle, not pain, more like a thin, dry twig snapping. He froze, and then he heard it. Not a sound, not words, a direction, as if something behind his ear were trying to figure out from which side to exit. His fingers started to tremble. He knew what he was going to do next, and he knew it was a bad idea. But worse was just waiting. He took a cotton swab, drew a deep breath, and Chapter 14. The Fiber. He eased the cotton swab into his ear, a couple of centimeters, safe. Then deeper, into the zone where you're not supposed to feel anything. That's where he felt resistance. Not the eardrum, not earwax, something elastic and alive that first gave way to the swab's shape, then sprang back into itself. He pushed a little harder, a thin squeak like the swab scraped across the wet shell of a cocoon. Matt gagged. Nausea hit so fast, the edges of his vision went dark. He pulled the swab out, and on the tip there wasn't wax, wasn't blood, but a thin whitish slime, trailing in a strand. The filament quivered, and he saw the end curl in, as if trying to reconnect with wherever he had pulled it from.
Jesus.
He breathed, feeling his palms go slick at once. The swab trembled between his fingers. The strand slowly let go, as if releasing his choice. He tossed it into the sink. It stuck to the metal, like mycelium clinging to old wood. Chapter 15. The Root. He decided he had to pull it all out, now, before it went deeper. He grabbed the tweezers, fine-tipped, sharp, surgical, for splinters, for perfect eyebrows, for the OCD committee. Brought them to his ear. The skin burned like heat had pooled under it. He spread the rim of his ear with his fingers and caught the split second when the lamp threw a clean reflection straight inside. And he saw it. Deep in the ear canal, thin white threads, but not chaos, structure. As if a spider were weaving a web, only the pattern wasn't spider-made. It was growing, spiraling inward toward the skull. And worst of all, one filament was pulsing, not fast, once every 3 to 4 seconds, in the same count he'd heard that morning. Nausea rose again. He braced a hand against the wall. Then he steadied himself. He brought the tweezers to the opening, touched the threads. One of them snapped deeper at once, like it sensed the threat. That was too close to animal behavior. He inhaled, slid the tweezers in further, and caught a thread. In a split second, the thread latched onto the metal like a tiny root finding the perfect pore. He yanked. Hard. Too hard. Something bigger than he expected tore free from his ear. A keen burn, a flash of pain, the sound of wet tissue ripping. He dropped to his knees, one palm smacking the tile. Dangling from the tweezers was a branching white filament mass, an inch or so long. Not just a thread, but a fine root with micro branches. The pulsing in his ear grew, not dulled, intensified, as if ripping out a piece had triggered a response. And then, the mass on the tweezers twitched, contracted, as if trying to find purchase, as if it were seeking the way back into warmth. Matt yelped and flung the tweezers into the tub. The root thing hit the porcelain and stuck, the way mycelium clings to bark in a forest. He rinsed his ear with peroxide. Foam hissed, and with the bubbles came something pinkish. Not blood, not pus. Something between, translucent pink, viscous, smelling like wet earth. He doubled over, gripping the edge of the sink. It felt like claws inside his skull had grabbed the meninges and were trying to climb higher. The nausea turned feral. He barely made it to the toilet, retched bile. The pounding in his ears wasn't his heartbeat. It was another rhythm. Quiet, quieten, deeper, pause. And for the first time, he heard words clearly. Not a whisper, an instruction.
Don't touch. Don't interfere. We are growing.
Chapter 16. The Dog's Sense. He sat on the bathroom floor for 5 minutes, shaking, pressing a towel to his ear until he couldn't tell what was trembling, his hands or the ground beneath him. The dog came first, carefully, not the way he usually did when he heard vomit or crying. He approached slowly, head low, tail tucked, as if he'd scented a predator. The dog touched his knee with his nose, then flinched, whined, and padded into the living room, hiding behind the couch. That was worse than any symptom. This dog wasn't afraid of thunder, wasn't afraid of bears at the dumpsters, but he was afraid of whatever he sensed in Matt. When Matt finally stood, the cotton swab in the trash twitched, the slightest movement, as if something inside it was still alive. But if you blinked, the thread lay motionless. Chapter 17. The Mailbox Gesture. He made up his mind. Hospital. Now. He threw on a jacket, tucked a bit of dry gauze into his ear, like a cork, as if that could stop the growth. The walk to the car felt longer than usual. His legs were rubbery, a vibration under the knees, as if something was unspooling there too. Each step thudded in his temple, a dull chop like an axe into wood. When he reached the parking area, he saw the first real transformation in someone else. Not a dream, not his mind. Mrs. Harper, the neighbor who always chatted about the weather, had skin behind her ear that cracked like dried earth. From the micro fissures, thin, pale threads peeked out, braided together. She stood by the mailbox and smiled wide, too wide. Her eyes were wet, glassy.
Matt, honey, your spring migraines always come back, don't they?
And slowly, so slowly, she raised her finger to her ear, traced along the cracks, and moved the finger to her temple. The exact gesture. Matt felt sweat bloom under his nails. He stepped back, forced a crooked smile, and slid into the car. The engine turned over on the third try. Chapter 18. The Bus Stop. He drove carefully. The road ran along a strip of forest. The pines looked too straight, too identical, like soldiers on parade. With every mile, the pulsing inside his skull thinned but sank deeper, as if the threads were sending signals not to the ear, but toward the center of his head. At an intersection, he stopped at a red light and saw 7 people stood at the bus stop, shoulder to shoulder, almost touching. All of them stared at a single point, somewhere up in the treetops. No talking, no gestures, only a synchronized tilt of their heads to the right, like birds responding to a signal no one else could hear. The light turned green. None of them moved. They stood as one body, unblinking. Matt hit the gas so hard, the engine howled. Chapter 19. Triage Rhythm. The ER was unexpectedly quiet. A couple of colds, a kid with a cast, a man scowling at his phone. Looked normal. But behind the desk sat an orderly tapping his fingers on the counter. Tum, tum, pause, tum. The same rhythm Matt heard in his ear. Hellish synchronization. When the nurse came over, he noticed it immediately. A small white bandage behind her ear. Her hair was styled to cover that patch of skin.
How can I help you?
Her voice was gentle, but for a split second, the words lagged behind her lips.
My ear, something got in. I think it's an infection. Fungal. I need a doctor. Urgently.
She nodded with sympathy.
Of course. Have a seat. Fill out this form, okay?
She handed him a tablet. When he took it, her fingers lingered on his a moment too long. Not sexual, not friendly, studying, as if she were taking an imprint of his signal. Chapter 20. Inside the System. Matt sat down and started filling out the form. Then he heard it. The man in the next chair lifted his collar to scratch his shoulder. The skin on his neck was gray-white, crisscrossed with micro cracks. When he scratched, a thin filament slid out from under his nail, as if he'd snagged a little root. The thread twitched, and the man quickly tucked it back under his collar, hiding it like nothing had happened. Then he looked at Matt and smiled exactly the way Mrs. Harper had. Hush. He didn't say it, but Matt heard it in his head. Right then, it was obvious the hospital wasn't a refuge. If everything here was synchronizing, the infection was already inside the system. He rose slowly, left the tablet on the chair, and headed for the exit. The nurse didn't stop him. She only watched him go and slid a finger behind her own ear, almost tenderly. Act 3. The World Connects. Chapter 21. We are inside. He drove home by a different route, avoiding crowded streets. The stoplights felt too slow. The world seemed to breathe with a delay, and he kept catching himself holding one hand near his ear, as if afraid something might come out of it. At home, the first things he did were closed the curtains, checked the locks, turned off his phone. The dog came out from behind the couch, but didn't approach. He lay down by the door like a guard. He didn't whine, he listened. Matt found antiseptic, scissors, medical tape in the medicine cabinet. His plan was crude and desperate. Tape the ear shut so nothing could get out.
If I seal it, it'll grow inward.
We're already inside. Everywhere inside. Deeper, better.
He froze. Don't think. Don't listen. Don't believe.
Out. Be quiet. This is my body.
There was no reply, only a faint, damp rustle under the skin. Chapter 22. The Wall. The dog snapped his head up, sudden, sharp. Ears pricked, the fur along his spine stood on end. He wasn't looking at the door or the window, but at the wall. As if someone had walked behind the drywall. Matt stepped closer, pressed his palm to the wall. He felt a vibration, faint, rhythmic, the same rhythm as in his ear. Outside rhythm matched inside rhythm. Quiet, quieter, deeper, pause. The dog growled low, a warning, then barked once high and sharp and jumped back like he'd been shocked. Matt slowly slid the furniture aside, grabbed a flashlight, and lit the baseboard. Where the wood should have been clean, he saw a pale, downy bloom, like a light mold, but too fresh, as if it had appeared just now. He ran his finger across it. The structure, not dust, not ordinary mold, mycelium. Fine, tangled roots, and they flinched at his touch. Didn't crumble, contracted, as if surviving the contact. He jerked away like he'd been burned. Chapter 23. The Procession. Footsteps outside. Too many. and two synchronized. Matt carefully lifted the corner of the curtain. People were walking down the street. 6, 8, 12, all ages, teenagers, a woman with a bag, a man in work clothes, an elderly couple. They moved slowly, almost reverently, heads slightly tilted, each step the same length. No conversations, no stray glances. Then a click, like a signal. All of them stopped at once, as if on command. Silence. The dog growled. Matt instinctively pulled him close. One man, denim jacket, turned his head toward Matt's window. Slowly. Eyes matte, yet intensely attentive like an owl's. He felt the gaze. Suddenly, the man lunged at the house in 3 quick strides, like a predator spotting prey. The others stayed where they were. Only one attacked. He slapped the door with his palm. Not a knock, not a fist, a flat strike, like testing its strength. Once, pause. Once, pause. Once, harder. The others turned their heads toward the sound, but did not approach. Matt stepped back from the window, the pulsing in his ear intensifying, pressure building, as if whatever was inside him was answering the rhythm outside.
Go away,
he whispered, not sure to whom. In a single instant, as sudden as it began, the man stopped pounding, turned, and calmly rejoined the line. The group moved on, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 24. The Invitation. He understood now. They sensed the infected as theirs, and the uninfected as a threat. But what terrified him more was this. Whatever was inside him could sense them too. He heard it in his ear.
Don't be afraid. We'll welcome you, everyone, together.
He clenched his teeth and slammed his fist against the wall, trying to drown the voice out.
This isn't we. It's me. My body. My head.
The response wasn't a thought. It was a feeling, like a hand stroking his hair to soothe a child.
You are part. Don't separate. Together, warmer.
The nausea came not from the words, but how right it felt inside. Comforting, inviting. There was no loneliness. And that was the horror. The fungus wasn't offering death. It was offering freedom from pain and fear. A cure. And that was worse than dying. Chapter 25. The Network. He rushed to the bathroom, cranked the shower to scalding, nearly boiling. He wanted to burn the ear, cauterize everything inside, even if it meant a burn. But the moment steam touched his skin, he heard a faint crackle inside his skull, like a thread snapping back from a heat source. No, the fungus pressed from within, keeping the heat at bay. The dog howled, long drawn out, like warning a pack. Matt braced both palms on the sink, The mirror threw back his face, pale, shadowed under the eyes. He tilted his head to inspect his ear and froze. Behind the ear, where he'd ripped out the strand, the skin wasn't just swollen. A micro-relief had formed there, like a braid of thin channels running down into the neck. And in the center, a pale point pulsing. He understood. What he'd pulled out was only an outer thread. Inside, there was a network. Chapter 26. The Breakthrough. He stood before the mirror, breathing raggedly, and felt it moving inside. Not just a pulse, a creeping shift, as if something were slowly pushing a narrow route through the tissues of his skull, testing the path. At first, a dull ache, migraine deep. Then the pain sharpened into a line, traveling under the skin toward his fingers. He pressed and felt it answer, a live strand the width of a matchstick sliding beneath the surface.
No!
He slammed his fist into the wall just to keep from touching his ear. That triggered a response. The network lunged outward. A knife bite of pain carved from ear to jaw hinge, as if a thin membrane inside had torn and the mycelium were trying to break through the skin. He clamped a towel in his teeth and balled his fists to keep from screaming. Under the skin, right at the surface, a bulge rolled, slick, 3 to 4 centimeters long, snaking toward his lower jaw, a trapped serpent sliding beneath a clear film. He could see it, not just feel it, the skin stretching, the color shifting to a faint gray. Then a pinpoint of pressure, like something sharp, touched the inner side of the skin behind his ear, testing for an exit. He heard it inside.
Do not resist. We must emerge. Breathe.
And in that moment, the skin began to yield from within, not tearing, stretching like a bud forcing itself through thick bark. The dog lunged at him and barked, sharp, point blank, not from fear, but to snap him out of it. It worked. Matt grabbed a bottle of alcohol and soaked his palm. He slammed that palm against the spot behind his ear, rough, grinding pressure, burning the skin and the thing trying to force its way out. The hiss was doubled. Alcohol plus living. The pulse detonated into fire. He almost blacked out, but he didn't lift his hand. Under his palm, something narrowed, retreated, pulled back into the depth of the tissues, beaten by chemistry plus pressure. He held for 5 seconds, 10, 15, until the pain threw him sideways and he hit the floor. The dog licked his hand and jerked away as if the taste burned with a fungal bitterness. Matt lay there, palm clamped to his head. The pulsing weakened, but didn't stop. The mycelium had withdrawn inward, not out. It hid, went into waiting. He understood the horror. If it couldn't break out, it would go deeper into the brain. Dark flecks crowded his vision. The world closed in. The last thing he saw before he passed out was a white filament caught in the dog's fur at the shoulder, barely there, like dust. Chapter 27. The house isn't his anymore. He came on to the floor, lying on his side, cheek pressed to cold tile. He couldn't hear the clock. It was ticking, but not for him. The world was soundless, as if someone had stolen all the high frequencies. The dog sat nearby, but not close, keeping a cautious distance, afraid to approach again. Matt pushed himself up slowly. His head was heavy, but one thing was clear. The fungus was still there. He stepped to the mirror. Behind his ear, a burn, red and raw, skin damaged, but no bulge now. Yet just above it, near the hairline, a tiny new spot had formed, like a fresh node of the network. He touched it and felt a microscopic twitch. Inside. The reaction was instant. He gagged and vomited straight into the sink. Foam spilled out, and in it, 2 white filaments, less than a centimeter long. They curled as if recoiling from sunlight. The dog growled, not at Matt, but at the sink. Chapter 28. The Park. By evening, the sky had gone heavy and gray, like someone had pulled it taut by hand. Matt felt it. Staying home was dangerous. The walls seemed to pulse in time with whatever was inside him. He needed to get out, check the world, or check himself. He pulled up his hood and called the dog. The dog didn't want to go, held back on the leash, but obeyed anyway, as if he understood. Better to go together than leave his owner alone. The park was 5 minutes away, small, a playground, 2 picnic tables, swings, and a loop for runners. A place where life usually looked peaceful. Today, too peaceful. People sat in clusters, pairs, trios, families, all with one thing in common. No one spoke. Their postures were relaxed, faces calm, but too uniform, without micro-movements, without awkwardness, without fuss. They sat like they were listening to music only they could hear. The dog gave a low growl. His hackles lifted again. Matt noted details. 4 women on yoga mats sat in the exact same pose, legs crossed, back straight, chin slightly lowered. 2 elderly couples held hands, not like lovers, their fingers laced as if passing a current, their hands trembling in one rhythm. On the playground, children swung in sync, no laughter, no hurry, metronome swings. Then, in one corner, birds burst into the air, a flock of sparrows lifting like a single organism, as if someone had given a command. The dog barked. Heads turned toward him all at once, not sharply, not predatory, curious, as if they'd heard a new tone on the network. Matt was about to leave when he spotted a man on a bench, the only person who didn't look connected. He sat a little apart, hunched, arms to his chest, pale face, frightened eyes. He watched the others the same way Matt did, uninfected. Matt started toward him, too late. One of the yoga women stood. The movement was smooth, unhurried. She walked to the man and placed a hand on his shoulder. He shook his head like he was trying to throw the hand off, but couldn't. His body seemed to go wooden. The woman slowly leaned to his ear and whispered something. Too soft to catch the words, but Matt knew the intonation. The whisper wasn't human. It sounded like moss moving under bark, like mycelium growing in soil. The man jerked, sharp, desperate, and suddenly went smooth and calm. His face relaxed. He stood, joined the circle, sat, crossed his legs, exhaled to the rhythm of the others. Matt understood. They don't persuade, they connect. Chapter 29. The Signal. The dog gave a small yip, and that was a mistake. Several heads turned toward them. Not all, only the ones closest, but the look was the same. Recognition. You're not with us. A girl, 16 maybe, rose slowly. Then, in the next second, her body made 2 quick predatory steps like the man by Matt's house. Then, slow again, soft, serene. Matt read the cue. If he ran, they'd switch to the hunter mode. He dropped his gaze and walked away at a calm pace, the dog at his side, tail tucked, lips lifted to show teeth. They were almost to the park exit when the voices reached him, not through the ear, but from inside.
Don't leave. You're tired. It's quiet here. It's warm here. With us, there's no pain.
He sped up. Not a run, a fast walk. Then a hiss of breath behind him, light but too sharp. He turned. 3 people stood closer than they had a second ago. Too much closer. Their eyes weren't empty, they were full of pity.
Why do you hurt yourself?
He broke into a run. Chapter 30. Home. Running only helped for the first 100 yards. The world smeared at the edges. Every step thudded in his ear, and with each beat it felt like the mycelium was growing faster. The dog ran alongside, sprinted ahead, stopped, glanced back as if covering the flanks. In his head, voices, not people, not him.
Don't run. Running is cold. Together is warmer. Stop. Allow. Just allow.
It felt like those thoughts were rooting into his own, threading into his nerves. He nearly tripped, but made it to the house, slammed the door. The dog leapt, throwing his weight into it, helping it shut. Outside, no one pounded, no one tried the handle, no pursuit, no aggression, just silence. Final. The door slides back with a soft plastic sigh, and the gurney glides into the hall like an object that already knows the way. The doctor walks beside it, one hand resting lightly on the rail. A nurse steadies the IV pole. Its wheels squeak exactly every 3rd meter. The squeak matches his pulse too perfectly. The corridor is an aquarium. Glass stations, white walls, green exit arrows. Behind the glass, someone laughs, steady, uniform, like a looped recording. In the next room, a TV murmurs the weather, but the forecaster stands motionless, like a still image, and the lips say precipitation, half a beat late. The air smells of antiseptic, plastic, and damp greenhouse soil.
Almost there. It's quieter in there.
He says, in the tone of tucking a child in. He tries to lift his head, but his neck won't obey. The muscles are softened into pleasant wadding. Machines along the walls blink green rectangles, each with the same waveform. In the liters of air between them, one and the same swell lives. A left turn, another, a hush of a service elevator, his reflection in the brushed metal, his own face, pale, far too calm for someone who wants to scream. A bandage behind his ear, the edge slightly darker, like wet paper. He tries to reach for it. His fingers rest quietly, his palms open, like a sleeper who has nothing left to hold. The elevator opens to another corridor, longer, wider, colder light. On the door, a plaque without a number, just one word, General. The letters sit clean, as if freshly pressed into plastic. The door recesses into the wall, and the silence grows thicker. First, the smell. Here, the antiseptic doesn't drown the other scent. Warm, damp soil, the spicy bitterness of spores, the cut stem smell of a morning mushroom. Then, sound. Not cries, not groans, breathing. Many breaths merging into one. The interval between inhale and exhale is identical. The pause, identical. Like a choir that's lost its music, but kept its conductor. The gurney rolls inside. The ward is huge, not a ward, a hall. Rows of beds stretch like greenhouse beds, 4 to a side, 30, 40 people. Each has an IV pole, a monitor, curtains neatly drawn aside. Each face is calm, eyes closed or half-lidded, gazes fixed on one point, up where the vents look like mesh, and each has a bandage behind the ear, some of them transparent. Under the clear ones, you can see a pale lacework of the thinnest threads, milky capillaries running toward the temple under the skin in fine tracks. On the skin, slight bulges, as if a seed had stirred beneath and settled into its new place. Some have more than one band, another at the base of the neck. One man wears a narrow strip across the temple, sealed like a scar track, but too straight, too fresh. He pulls air in, his chest empty like after a long run. The hall breathes in with him. He tries to break count, to hold, to trip it, and he manages for a fraction, but in that same instant, the monitor above the bed chirps and smooths his curve, like an invisible hand flattening a sheet. The nurse leans over, checks the sensor's adhesive. Her hair smells of apple and something warm, sweet, compost after rain.
It's cozy here, isn't it?
Not a question, a statement. The doctor kicks off the brake, and rolls the gurney to an open spot by the wall. In the next bed lies a boy of about 9. His lashes tremble, his eyes open and look at Matt the way kids look at store windows, with patient readiness to take what's theirs when it's time. Behind the boy's ear is a tiny clear film, and beneath it a thread, finer than hair, runs to the temple.
Mom will be here soon.
She whispers to the boy. He doesn't nod, he simply exhales in the same rhythm as the rest. At the end of the row, an orderly appears with a cart of bandages. He moves between the beds, and the whole hall gives the faintest stir. Not people, not sheets, the curtains take a small breath together, like grass when someone's foot brushes it. The doctor hangs the IV, gloves whisper. He says something about infusion, supportive therapy, sleep. The words break in the ear like dry twigs. A second nurse, new, not the one by the door, sets a plastic cup of water on the table and a pot with a small green sprout. The soil is darkened by tiny wet spots, as if someone watered it a moment ago.
We don't get sick here. Here, we're simply together.
The doctor says, with the honesty of a man who's seen worse. Movement behind him. The gurney is nudged closer to the wall. A blanket is drawn over his shoulders, the way a mother does when a child finally stops crying. From the ceiling, the breath comes down softly, vents working without noise, only a hush like moss underfoot. On the left, a woman turns her palm on the sheet, and at once 2 others on neighboring beds make the same small, needless gesture. On the right, a man gently bites his lip, and 3 farther down echo the bite. No one looks at anyone. Bodies sense bodies without eyes. A familiar silhouette passes. For a moment, Kyle? No. The shape dissolves between the beds, absorbed into sameness of form and color. Along the wall, a call panel glows with amber call lights. A few are lit steady, none blink. No one presses the button. No need. The doctor touches the bandage behind his ear. The skin under the gauze is warm, rising and settling to the common pause. Under the doctor's fingers, he feels not pressure, not pain, emotion meeting him. As if a thin thread growing toward the temple had laid itself from the inside against the place he touched, and for a heartbeat became smoother, more in sync.
Good.
He breathes, and the good isn't meant for him alone. The gurney locks, latches click. The IV line beads like a stem after fog. He closes his eyes for a moment and hears the whole hall take the pause between inhale and exhale with him. He opens them again, and the boy beside him is smiling up to the ceiling, as if he sees something there that isn't, or is. For a second, The doorway shows the lit hallway. Another gurney rolls by. On it, a dog in a cone, big and golden. She turns her head, meets his gaze, eyes narrowed, anxious, muzzle bandaged, a slim white strip on her neck, too high for an ordinary shot. The dog pricks one ear, the ear, and lets out a thin, plaintive whine. Before the door seals, he sees a vet in green lean over and stroke her between the ears, slowly, in that exact rhythm. The door hushes shut. The doctor sets a hand on his forearm, the nurse on his chest, as if fitting her palm to his breathing.
Rest now, Mr. Rivers. You're home.
The word home presses an invisible switch somewhere deep in his head. And from there, from the warm, damp place under the temple, a wave of agreement rises, cozy as a blanket. Correct. He tries to hold his own name, Matt, like a pebble in his palm in fast water. The pebble slips, the palm fills with moss. In the corner panel, another amber call light blinks on by itself. No hand reached. In answer, at the far end, another goes out by itself, as if a worry had found its answer without hands. The doctor steps back half a pace. The nurse smooths the sheet. Together, they make a tiny motion. 2 fingers behind the ear and to the temple. Outside, behind the frosted windows, the city breathes in the same time. At the intersections, people stand shoulder to shoulder. Birds lift in a single wave. Grass bows as one field. In the branches where nests are set, a fine white down shows through. Inside, it's warm. There is no choice and no pain. The sheet lies flatter. The curtains take a small breath. The shoots reach for the light. And in this quiet white hall, it finally gets quieter.